Story time, story time, story time with Travis. Story time, story time, story time with Travis. Hey Travis, tell us a story.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Time for another edition of Story Time with Travis. With me, Travis Myers. Today I'm talking kid stuff. Some stories from when I was a kid. Now, a lot of times when I'm sharing an anecdote or two with someone who is not from New York, I'll get the old, wow, I can't imagine what it must have been like growing up in New York City. Now, I do totally get that. All of us have our own stories from our youth, from wherever we grew up. But I also know that oftentimes New York City has a bit of a mythical or even cinematic feel to it that a lot of people, I don't know, almost find exotic in a way. So, on this episode of Storytime with Travis, I'm gonna share a couple of stories of what it was like being a preteen running around the streets of New York City in the 1970s. All right. Now, understand, the 1970s in America was a very different place. The Vietnam War was in full swing until what, 1975? It was also in 1975 that the New York Daily News printed the headline, Ford to City, drop dead. All right, referring to President Gerald Ford's refusal to provide federal funding to prevent New York City's looming bankruptcy. That same year, the mayor of the most populated city in the United States, Abe Beame, laid off over 5,000 New York City police officers, over 2,100 firefighters, and over 2,900 sanitation workers. Then we had the summer of 1977 when we had the blackout, which was very famous, resulting in the looting of over 1,600 stores and nearly 3,800 arrests. Son of Sam was in full swing, running around the city, terrorizing and killing 6 people and wounding 7 others. But for most of us kids at the time, life was life. I mean, we didn't understand politics or really even crime, even though it was all around us. It was just simply the way things were. And for most of us, we just went along with, again, the way things were as innocent children, not knowing anything could be different. I mean, I remember being a kid on 11th Street, and my best friend Johnny and I, again, we're 8 or 9 years old at the time. All right, we were playing cops and robbers and banged up old stripped cars that would sometimes sit tireless on cinder blocks for months on our street before the sanitation department would eventually take them away. And we'd crawl all over these cars, inside and out, uh, pretend to drive them, sit in them to get out of the rain. If there was still any glass in them that hadn't already been broken out by some teenage vandals, we'd eventually break it out ourselves. And not to be malicious, but just out of boredom, you know? I mean, the city was in bad shape in those days. And yes, even in the village where now brownstones can sell for tens of millions of dollars, there were abandoned buildings. And I remember there were a row of several boarded up buildings on Greenwich Street that we weren't allowed to go near because of the junkies and prostitutes that would frequent them. And of course, our parents wanted wanted us to be nowhere near them. But of course, as they say, boys will be boys. And me and Johnny decided we had to go on a little adventure. And we were running through a few of these buildings, checking them out upstairs, downstairs, inside, outside. And so, yeah, here we are, maybe 9 years old at the time, running around this abandoned building, just exploring. And I step on a piece of sheetrock that was covering a hole in the floor and fall right through it, right up to my armpits. And I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this hole, and my little legs are dangling down to the floor below. Johnny can't pull me out because the sheetrock is like really tight around me. And plus, he's only 9 years old. The kid's got no strength in him. And that's it. I'm stuck, right? So Johnny runs out of the building. He goes down the block and gets one of the barbers from the Cuban barber shop there on 11th Street. And the barber comes and just, a grown man, he just yanks me right out of that hole. No harm, no foul, right? Adventure had, nobody hurt, until the barber told my ma. And my ma told my pop. And well, the end of the story, I get a pretty good beating that night. And needless to say, I didn't run around those buildings again. Yeah, so that's the end of that one. So hang on a minute. Hang on 1 minute. Pay attention to the sponsors here who help make this show possible. And please support them if you can, the way they support us. Hey, how you doing? It's me again, another nobody, Travis Myers. And today we're going to talk whiskey. I know most of you think of me as an all-American patriotic type guy, and you are right. But when it comes to whiskey and drinking whiskey, which I do, I always go for the Irish stuff. And my choice when it comes to the Irish stuff is Powers Irish Whiskey. Established back in 1791, it's a triple distilled, oak-aged whiskey. Powers is simply magic. It also happens to be the #1 selling whiskey in Ireland, which has got to say something, because if it's good enough for the Irish, it's good enough for you. So the next time you raise a glass, fill it with Powers, and think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. This is a 2024 American Eagle gold coin, which I bought along with several others last year. I'm very happy to report that its value has gone up over 40% in the first year. See, I was encouraged to buy some gold by a financial advisor friend who suggested I be more diversified with my investments. She said gold and silver was a very safe place to park some money, as well as a good hedge against inflation. So I took her advice, and all I can say is I wish I had bought more, as it's been so very, very good to us so far. Now, I purchased these gold coins from the good people over at stackingboise.com, who could not have been nicer, more knowledgeable, or more helpful. Now, I'm certainly no financial expert, but I will say from experience, if you're looking to make an investment, buy yourself some gold. And some real gold that you could hold in your hand, just like this coin you see here. And if you do, then do like I did and get with the good folks over at stackingboise.com. I'm telling you, they're good people, they took good care of me, and they'll take good care of you. Again, that's stackingboise.com. And hey, tell them Travis sent you. We later had a couple of apartments up on 81st Street. I really liked 81st Street as a kid. There were, just a ton of other kids to hang out with on our block. Most of all came from, working class families. Our parents were construction workers and cab drivers, Con Edison employees, hospital workers, and the like, I would say most of us went to public school, and many of us went to Catholic schools. But every afternoon and all day on the weekends and in the summers, we'd just run up and down that block until the streetlights came on, or we got called up to our apartments by our parents for dinner. I remember one afternoon, I think it was me, Roger, and Bobby. We're sitting on the stoop, just bored out of our minds. I'm going to say fall of 1975. All right. And we get it in our heads to build a little campfire under the stoop. Okay. A campfire. Like we're some kind of Boy Scouts, playing Davy Crockett here. I have no idea what we were thinking, but we get a little bit of construction wood out of the trash, and we get some newspapers, and we build this tiny little fire. Okay. And it was on a concrete floor under some concrete steps that went up to the building. surrounded by brick walls on three sides. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? So we build this little campfire, and, you know, again, because we are, 10 years old, right? It takes a minute or two to get started. But once it gets going, again, we're determined. We're determined. And once it gets going, it's pretty cool. We realize that a campfire makes smoke. And now we're scared because smoke is going to draw attention to what we're doing. And we begin to panic just a little bit. And I get the brilliant idea to put the fire out by smothering the flames. Because, smart kid that I am, I know no oxygen equals no flame. And I tell Bobby to put this cardboard box from the trash over the campfire to smother the flame. And of course, he does exactly what I told him to do. And all was right with the world. Until, of course, the box goes up in flames. And now, this scared us so bad, we all just fled the scene. Not knowing what to do or where to go, we all ran up. We decided, for whatever reason, to hide out in Gimbel's department store on 86th Street. So we'd run up there and we roam around the store for hours, sitting on a living room set in the furniture department, and imagine what our fate would be once we returned to the block, and found the building in ashes and the police at our doors. It took a little while, but eventually we manned up as good as we could for 10-year-olds, and we made our way back to the block. And to our surprise, found zero damage to the building, just the remnants of some of the burnt trash that had been left away from the fire. No police. There was no angry superintendent. And shockingly, no one had a clue of what we had done, except for us three. And in true city kid fashion, we never told a soul. And no one was ever the wiser. Well, until, of course, now. So yeah, boredom. Boredom. I think boredom with all kids is the biggest mischief maker. What's that they say about idle minds make mischievous hands or something like that? And so, yeah, we were often just bored right out of our little minds. And I'm sure it's the same everywhere. But for us, boredom often resulted in ball breaking. And since we could only break each other's balls, so much, we would have to resort to breaking the balls of others. And in our case, we had two fellas on our block that, oh man, would just get a lot of grief. These poor guys. To us, they were two nameless, middle-aged men that we certainly had no hate for them, but sadly, they fell into our sights as victims we could toy with. And well, that was where the ball breaking began. The first of these victims I'll tell you about, we just called him the Chinaman. Now I know Chinaman is a very lazy nickname for this poor fella, but he was a short order cook at the bar and grill that sat on the corner. And the kitchen had one of these exhaust fans that went out directly into the street. And so one day we discovered that if you threw a snowball into that fan, it would shred the snowball and throw fragments all over the kitchen. And so, of course, we did it. And we did it again, and then again. And every time we did it, this poor older Chinese fella would run out the back door of the bar and see if you could catch whoever it was that was doing this to him. And of course, we would run across the street, hide behind the car, and watch him through the car windows, and we would just laugh our asses off, But eventually, he figured out where we were and started chasing after us, and even throwing empty beer bottles at us. But of course, what did that do? That only increased the risk and the thrill value, and encourage us to torture him even more. But eventually we did tire of this nonsense and left the poor old fellow alone. Except for, I think, one more time, probably months later in the summer, we wanted to see how a watermelon would go through the fan. And needless to say, that really pissed him off too. Then came Hugo. Up the block and across the street from the Chinaman's place, there was a building that had an Eastern European super. We never knew what country this poor fella came from, but we dubbed him Hugo simply because we figured he must be Yugoslavian. That was the only country we can come up with, so we named him Hugo. He was a real grumpy, miserable guy, and none of us kids on the block really liked him. But really, this poor bastard didn't deserve any of the abuse that we would deliver. I mean, we would just do, just the stupidest stuff to make this poor guy's life more miserable than it already was. I mean, dumb things like wait until he pulled all the trash up from the cellar on trash day. Then 3 or 4 of us would take it all back to the bottom of the stairs and pile it up in front of the locked cellar door. Then run across the street and wait on the stoop, sometimes for hours, up the block and until we see this poor guy have to move all the trash back up onto the sidewalk for a second time. The poor bastard would shovel the snow in front of his building, and we would do our best to put it all back there so we'd have to go and come and clean it again. We were just awful kids. Then one day somebody had a box of toothpicks. Why or from where, I have no idea. But we took one and jammed it into his bell, into the doorbell, so it would ring and ring continuously until he came out and removed the toothpick. And I don't know, we did this like 4 times in one day until our boy Hugo wised up and he waited inside the doorway for us and caught us doing it. And he came running out after us and we all took off except for poor Bobby, who got caught. He caught him and he dragged him back into the building. And let me tell you, we was all scared shit. Remember now, we're only like 10, 11 years old. And this guy is 50 plus years old. Eastern European guy who was probably fighting Nazis in World War II before making his way to New York City. So who knows what he's capable of, right? Well, luckily, one of our friend's fathers, what was his name? Mr. O'Brien is walking down the block at the time. We rush up to him. We tell him what's going on. We tell him what happened. And he rushed in to find the super, had Bobby by the scruff of his neck, was holding him up against the wall, lecturing him, that's within the vestibule of the building. And, thankfully nothing happened to him other than, of course, being scared for his life. But we all got a good scolding, a really good dressing down from Mr. O'Brien, who let us know in no uncertain terms to leave the super alone, or he, Mr. O'Brien, was going to kick our asses if Hugo the super didn't kill us first. And, that was kind of the end of that, All right. So with that one done, we'll take another little break, but we're going to be back in 1 minute. Hey, how you doing? Another nobody here, Travis Myers. This one's going out in particular to all my drinking friends out there, because I got a new favorite thing, and it's called Shanky's Whip, and it is magical. It's Irish whiskey mixed with a little caramel, a little cream, a little vanilla, and it's heavenly. What more can I say? I suggest you pick up a bottle. You can have it as a shot with a cold beer, like I like. On the rocks, it's great. Mix it with a little cola. I promise you, you're going to love this stuff. Next time you raise a glass, think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey, do the right thing. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my nonsense. All the best, my friends.
Buy our books!
Hey there, true crime fans. Let me introduce you today to the Cold Case Initiative. The Cold Case Initiative is a foundation that donates money to smaller police agencies all over the country. It does this in order to offset the costs of scientific, forensic, and DNA testing with the hope of solving cold case homicides and other horrific violent crimes that otherwise would remain unsolved. Please, if you have it in your heart and a little money to spare, go to www.coldcaseinitiative.org. Again, that's www.coldcaseinitiative.org and lend a hand where it truly is needed. Be a part of solving a cold case. Every little bit helps. Know that 100% of the donations that go to the Cold Case Initiative go to agencies that are desperately in need of the help. So please, if you can, do the right thing and make a donation. Thanks, and all the best, my friends. So now I'm like 11 years old, all right? And as usual, like every other kid in the summer, in the city, bored out of my mind. And I remember I was sitting on the stoop with Bobby and Jimmy when we decided we needed to go on a little adventure. So we all went home to our respective apartments and returned with every penny we could scratch together. And it wasn't much, I'm telling you that right now. And then we headed over to the subway on 86th Street, and we each took turns jumping the turnstiles, and then rode the train down to Canal Street, where we spent the day running around Chinatown. Now I know I had been, but I'm pretty sure we had all been to Chinatown, with our families on some time or another. But for two 11-year-olds and a 10-year-old, this was a pretty cool solo trip to make. For us, New York's Chinatown was as exotic as taking a real trip to China as far as we were concerned. We wandered those unbelievably busy streets for hours. We passed all the seafood markets, the fruit markets, the Peking duck shops with the bright orange ducks hanging by their necks in the windows. Just in complete awe. It was just amazing. It was an amazing place for us. We went in and out of all the little gifty curio shops that are down there. We saw the chicken that could not only play tic-tac-toe, but you couldn't beat him. The chicken always won. Bobby and I threw in together and bought ourselves a Chinese throwing star from a kung fu shop on Canal Street that had all kinds of swords and knives and nunchucks and spears for sale. Three teenage boys asked us if we were looking for fireworks, something we had never thought of, but immediately said yes to. But again, to their disappointment, we had no money. So I think we purchased one pack of firecrackers for something like, I don't know, $1.50 at the time, And the three of us, yes, the three of us, okay, split one egg roll and shared a soda before we headed back uptown on the train and told the other kids about our great adventure and proceeded for the next day or two to set off our little pack of firecrackers, one at a time so they'd last as long as we could. And we got great amusement with the other 8 and 12-year-olds on the block, as well as throwing that kung fu star into cardboard boxes day after day for the rest of the summer. It was a really fun thing. Other things we would do and play at that age that had nothing to do with torturing grown men and breaking balls just out of spite would be to collect up some broomsticks and mop handles. Especially the mop handles were the best if you could find them because they were a little bit thicker. All right. And we'd break them into, a sword length. And then we'd round off the broken end at the edge by sanding it down and by rubbing it up and down on the concrete pavement until it got nice and smooth so it wasn't all jagged and broken. We get like 6 kids with these wooden swords and take the tops off old style metal trash cans, and brother, let me tell you, we had hours of fun having night fights, playing King Arthur in the street. We get some bloodied up knuckles and eventually somebody to get hit in the face or the eye. But man, did we have fun with that. So much fun. When it was hot, we'd collect up all the spray bottles from our mother's cleaning products or from the trash, wherever we could find them. Maybe get a bag of balloons from Lamston's or Woolworths and fill them all with water and make homemade squirt guns and water bombs and just, you know, have all day wars. Just battle it out all day. And this was years before any kind of super soaker was invented. And, we just make do for ourselves, but it was great. I remember one day we had some kids from the next block over join us. And no lie, we must have had like 30 kids throwing balloons, squirting each other all day. It was good times. Of course, there was, the ever-present Spalding, the little pink ball that was used for, absolutely every game we could think of. Stickball, stoop ball, corner ball, curve ball, box ball, which was a lot like a poor man's tennis. The best of them all, of course, was elimination, where a few of us would bounce a ball off the wall, and whoever missed the catch would have to go put his hands up against the wall, and each of the rest of us would get a chance to throw that ball at him just as hard as we could. Other games I remember, Ringalivio, Johnny and the Pony, Catch One, Catch All, were all also, played in the street, in an alley, in a schoolyard, a park, and there were no balls or equipment required at all for those games, just a willingness to have fun. And it seemed to me every block back then had like 30 kids on it. And you always knew all the kids on your block. And as you got older, you got to know kids from other blocks through school or maybe, through the church, since back then every church had some kind of youth program, and we'd visit them all, the different churches, where you could go and hang out with other kids. And, maybe some places would have a gym with basketball or a lounge kind of a room with a pool table. I remember we'd pay 25 cents for a spaghetti dinner. And every once in a while that they take the entire group to the movies. It really was great. It was a great way to grow up. And of course, the best part of the churches as you got a little bit older and became a teen was the girls. And new girls, not girls from your block or girls from school, but girls you wouldn't have met otherwise. That funny enough that was one of the one thing that kept me going to the church youth group was the girls. It wasn't the 25-cent spaghetti, and it certainly was not the religion. It was the girls that kept me coming back. But sadly, so much of that is past now. I almost never see kids hanging out in the street anymore, and it's really too bad. It's a loss of community, a community that will never be built again. So many relationships will never be made. It really is heartbreaking to me. But hey, things change, right? And saying that's all I got for you today, my friends. That's it. I'm going to end it there. So until next time, please do the right thing. Hit that like, hit that subscribe so you can catch more of my nonsense. All the best, my friends. Listen up. This one's important. As a rule, I never stump for charities, because most of them don't hand out as much money as they collect. And that's a sad fact. But not Tunnel to Towers. These guys do the right thing. They have an A+ rating from Charity Watch and a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. That's like the #1 charity watchdog group. With over 93% going towards the families of veterans and first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty. For only $11 a month. And it's easy. Just go to t2t.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org, and hit the donate button. Do the right thing and do good for the families and the veterans and the first responders who do good by you. It's only $11 a month. Thanks, and all the best.